Now, as I've mentioned earlier, a focus in your cost accounting would be to teach you on how to allocate these overhead costs. And in such endeavor class, you will be using different basis for allocating your costs class, and a common basis would be your normal production capacity. At this point, our class would be satisfied if you will just be able to remember the definition for normal capacity. Normal capacity is the production expected to be achieved on average over a number of periods or seasons under normal circumstances, taking into account the loss of capacity resulting from planned maintenance. So, you will encounter a lot of different kinds of capacity class: actual capacity, ideal capacity, theoretical capacity, full capacity, and each of them have their different use. But again, at this point, our subject is satisfied with you just being familiar with the definition of your normal capacity. It's not the same as full capacity because in normal capacity, you take into account the loss of capacity due to maintenance, due to planned maintenance. It will also not be exactly the same as your actual capacity because your normal capacity is a form of an estimate only, and it's possible that there will be unplanned or unexpected interruptions or deviations from your expected capacity. Basically, class, we use normal capacity to avoid undervaluing or overvaluing our inventories in case of abnormally high or abnormally low level of production. So, instead of using the actual class in cases of abnormally low and abnormally high levels of production, we stick to the normal capacity so as to avoid overvaluing or undervaluing the costs of our inventories. I've underlined a single sentence from paragraph 14 class because I find this very interesting. It says, most byproducts by their nature are immaterial. When this is the case, they are often measured at net realizable value, and this value is deducted from the cost of the main product. Plus, from this sentence alone, class, this would evolve into a full chapter in your cost accounting class, accounting for byproducts. And the rules observed there, class, primarily achieves these two sentences in the standard class. But again, that would not be a concern for our subject. That would be a concern for your cost accounting. Now we're done with the cost of conversion class. Again, the other component of our cost of inventories would be the other costs directly attributable in bringing the inventory to its present location and condition. Again, directly attributable costs, or simply understood as necessary costs. As to what these directly attributable costs, other directly attributable costs are, they can be anything, class, as long as they are necessary to bring the inventory to its present location and condition. And that is why, class, the example given in the standard are not examples of costs that will qualify as directly attributable costs, but are instead those that will not qualify as directly attributable costs. They are not considered as necessary costs, and we will explain why. Okay, so letter A here is abnormal amounts of wasted materials. So of course, class, wastage, class, is not necessary to bring the asset to its intended use, location, and condition. Is it necessary for you to make abnormal wastages and shortages, class? The answer is no. So this should not be part of our inventoriable cost. Understand, class, that there are certain level of wastages and shortages, class, that are considered to be acceptable or normal. And such wastage, class, or shortages can qualify as part of the cost of your inventories. So what are we excluding from your directly attributable costs? What are we excluding from your necessary costs? Only those wastages that are considered to be abnormal. Only the abnormal amounts of wasted materials, labor, and overhead costs. Next would be storage costs. Storage costs that are not necessary in the production process. So once the goods are completed, class, the storage cost for your finished products is no longer considered necessary in the production process. Why are they not considered necessary in the production process? Because the production is already completed. We are dealing with completed goods. We are dealing with finished goods. So definitely, anything that is incurred after is no longer part of the production process. But if you will be asked, class, is it possible for storage cost to be considered inventoriable, to be considered a part of the cost of an inventory? The answer is yes, if the cost is necessary in the production process. So this is very common for pastries and other baking products, class, wherein they will have to be stored at a certain condition as part of the production process. Then such storage cost would be considered necessary and therefore inventoriable. Third, class, administrative overheads, those in relation to the management of the office, accounting, property management, everything else not related to the production, their cost will not be considered part of the cost of inventory. That should make sense because they do not contribute to the production of the inventories. Third would be selling cost. If we're dealing with selling cost, class, again, this should be classified already as a distribution cost. Definitely not part of your production cost. We are only selling goods that are only completed, meaning the production process is already completed. And therefore, selling cost should not be considered a necessary cost in the production process. This is obviously not related to production. So if this will be asked as a multiple choice question, class, you will be asked which of the following is an inventoriable cost. The modifications that will be done would be on the first two, class. Instead of abnormal amounts, it will be changed into normal amounts. Instead of storage cost only, it would say storage costs that is a necessary part of the production process. Now, with regard to these four items, class, if they are not to be considered part of the cost of the inventory, if they are not inventoriable, how then should we account for these costs? They are to be reported simply as expenses, class. So, at this point, you should have an idea. When you spend for something, class, the amount you've spent may either be recognized as an asset or as an expense. In this case, the costs that we incur for inventories may either be included as part of the cost of the inventory or going to be reported as an expense. So if you pay for the purchase price, include in the cost of the inventory. If you pay for direct materials, direct labor, and production overhead, include in the cost of the inventories. If you pay for something that is not a necessary cost, that is not necessary in bringing the inventory to its present location and condition, then it will be reported as an expense. So for problems, class, it would be a very common question in which you will be asked how much will be reported as cost of inventories, how much will be reported as an expense. Again, the function that is required from you is to simply add items that are inventoriable or items that are to be expense. So the challenge on your part is to simply correctly identify inventoriable costs from non-inventoriable costs. And the question that you should keep on asking yourselves, class, is whether the cost is necessary to bring the asset to its intended location and condition.